Hello everyone. Ireland's new Minister for Finance, Simon Harris, loves taking the Irish people for fools. Now, his latest plan has got massive coverage on the Irish media over the last day since it's been announced yesterday, November the 24th, and it was in relation to the access to cash bill. Of course, we've seen big pushback right across Europe and in Ireland in terms of the drive towards the digital euro. But at the same time, Harris has responded by bringing forward an access to cash bill, which requires financial institutions and banks to ensure an ATM machine is located within 10 kilometres of people and businesses. And this has major effects for rural Ireland. And of course, we've seen a decimation of the banking infrastructure right across rural Ireland and across urban Ireland also in the last number of years. And his claims are that a lot of elderly people use cash and a lot of people are digitally excluded from the drive towards the digital euro. Of course, we know this is an agenda that's been pushed by the European Union. It's been pushed by Pascal Donoghue, of course, when he was the chair of the Eurogroup before he swanned off to a $600,000 job in the World Bank in Washington, D.C. to pursue the neoliberal agenda that benefits the big corporations and the billionaires at the expense of ordinary people. And being pursued by people like Christine Lagarde, of course, that was a person who said inflation came out of nowhere and ignored the quantitative easing policies of the European Central Bank for years that has devalued most people's money in their pocket. But this goes back a number of years. It goes back to the time in Ireland of the Retail Banking Review, which was to look at the evolution of the changing forms of payment using electronic forms of payment and digitalisation of payments that we've seen over the past number of years. And one of the recommendations was the importance of cash to many, particularly people in lower incomes and the older population. And after that, the idea was to set up this bill called the Finance Provision of Access to Cash Infrastructure Bill of 2024. Now, this is the access to cash bill that Harris has been talking about that's due to be in play in Ireland this coming Friday, November the 28th. Now, following the recommendations of this, one of those recommendations was to set up a national payment strategy. And they came up with a number of recommendations. But of course, one of their recommendations was to move towards the digital wallet. Isn't that interesting? Of course, pursuing the agenda of the European Union. And what's really, really interesting with this is that they never acted on legislating on cash to be used in businesses, for instance. So there's no ban on cashless businesses. Many businesses, for instance, that don't accept cash. We see it all over the country now in growing numbers in terms of businesses that do not accept cash. We've seen a big boycott campaign because of the drive towards the cashless society. And also at the same time, we've seen a lot of people who are just too willing to go along with the whole charge of it being very convenient and safer and more accessible for people. And of course, this has been pushed by the Banking and Payments Federation of Ireland. Of course, Brian Hayes is the head of that organisation, and we all know about Brian Hayes, who was a Fine Gael minister. Of course, this is the merry-go-round in Irish political life, where they work in the political circles for a number of years before they move on to a higher paid job working for those who lobby the government, who benefit from government policies. And they said and claimed that it's the speed, security, fewer errors and improved cash flow for businesses. And wait for it, it's also been pushed up by Enterprise Ireland, who said that businesses that go cashless see an 11% increase in revenue. And they've been driving this agenda over the last number of years, where more than 70% of all transactions and purchases are digitally motivated rather than using cash. We see people using tap and go facilities, and many people that just use their cash or cards rather at the drop of a hat rather than actually using cash, which is so important now more than ever and impacts ordinary working class people most of all, because it's your privacy and in terms of we all see the drive towards the digital euro and digital ID that I've spoken about in quite a number of videos. But what is interesting with the National Payment Strategy recommendation, which is important, is that they never brought forward, as I said, legislation to ban cashless businesses, but instead they advised that the private sector be informed of the implications of the European Union legislative proposal and the legal tender of euros adopted by the European Commission back in 2023, which essentially means that businesses cannot accept cash if there is no change available, or it would affect the change they have. They would not have to accept cash. This is part of the regulation 2023-0212 rather, which shows you towards the drive towards the digital euro. But what's more revealing with this is that there's no penalties on any organisation or business that decides not to use cash. They only have to notify the European Commission on levels of acceptance of cash payments and to indicate remedial action. Now, at the same time, we've seen the Irish government and the Irish Central Bank saying they will enforce this legislation around the access to cash in terms of having ATMs within 10 kilometres of people around Ireland. And of course, they're going to be well stocked. I'm sure they are. But at the same time, we'll wait and see how this develops. But this is just a facade. It's a ruse used by Paris because they're fully signed up to driving towards digital euro. And as I said, more and more people are waking up to what's taking place in Irish society. And it's very important that more and more people should be waking up. So I'm very grateful for all your support. Please share my video far and wide to look behind the reality of what's being pushed forward with this bill over the next number of days. And really ask yourself over the last few days why the Irish media have been so strong in pushing this forward around access to cash. This comes at the same time when I spoke about it in a video about 10 days ago in relation to the European Central Bank, who were issuing, and the Irish government, Irish Ministry of Defence, which is issuing a formal notice to the people of Ireland to keep calm and carry cash in case of emergencies. Isn't that interesting? We've already seen the massive attacks on, for instance, digital transaction payments. We've seen that, for instance, with what happened in Spain and Portugal recently. We've also seen that in terms of safety of your financial circumstances, also in terms of the drive away from cash. And this is part of a bigger agenda, bigger globalist agenda. We all know it's tying into digital identification towards a cashless society. And of course, they're going to say it's a transformative way to move, an evolution. It's a natural process. That's what they're trying to portray it. When it's anything but a natural process, it's only been used for control and to keep those at the very top of society in their positions of power, where they can drive in digital currency, digital ID, and move towards social credit system. So thanks for supporting me. Please share my videos, and thanks so much again for everybody who comments and shares them far and wide. So from Dublin today, it's Long Fall. Take care. Bye bye.